Okay, so this is the last chapter of the first book. The first book is the main book, though. So when people say Tanya, they usually refer to this first book of the Tanya. There are 4 more books. So chapter 53 is going to tie together everything that we have been learning. It is continuing the conversation that we started with chapter 51 and 52, which is very Kabbalistic and a little technical. But when you look beyond that and deeper than that, you can see how indeed it is tying everything together. So it starts out with the conversation about the Shekhinah. So this is the conversation begun in chapter 51, where the question was, why do we say that the Shekhinah rested in the temple when God created the whole world? And the answer that we studied is that God created the whole world, but the world doesn't necessarily all reflect God in the same manner. And the reason for that is Kabbalistically, because most of the world is a byproduct, a result of a long process of little by little by little, a chain reaction of God's infinite light coming through 4 worlds. And in each world there's 10 attributes, and in each 10 attributes there's sub-attributes. Come on in. It is squishy today, which is a good thing. Try to find sheets to share with. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me. Okay. Yeah, so in each, so what's going on is that God is infinity. We talked about philosophically what that would mean, and it takes us down a rabbit hole, and it's kind of freaky to imagine. But anyways, let's just say for, to move on, God's infinity. But this world is not infinite. We don't experience, we're not conscious of infinity here. I can't be in 2 places at once and do 2 things at the same time or anything like that. I know I'm not everlasting, here I am, not there. So how does infinity go to here? Well, it's like a chain reaction. Atzilut, Beriah, Yetzirah, Asiya. Those are the names of the 4 worlds. But there are little pockets of infinity in this world. Our soul, right? Which is an unadulterated piece of God. But when we talk about the Shekhinah resting in a specific space, that space that we usually talk about is the temple, the holy temple. And so the Tanya in chapter 51 and 52 is like, what's going on there? How is it? What does that mean that the Shekhinah is resting there? And how is that? So the answer is that it's the result of a different process. The divine light is getting there, not through levels and stages of filtration, little by little by little, to where we come to our world and we don't really experience infinity at all, and we can go about our lives completely disconnected from it. In the temple, it takes an express train. Especially the first temple. There were actually 2 temples in our history. And the first temple was really where the full effect was experienced and appreciated. And specifically in the Holy of Holies of the first temple was where this divine light was just it was like a transplant from the source. What was in the Holy of Holies? Let's break this down. Does anybody know what was kept there? In the Holy of Holies was the cherubs. The famous, the 2 cherubs that faced each other, golden Ark of Covenant. Inside the Ark, so the cherubs were decorating the top. Inside the Ark, there was the 2 original tablets that God gave Moses at Sinai. He brought it down. And the original Torah. But specifically the tablets. That's the famous contents. He broke the first ones, and then the second ones came down, and that's a whole story. But For the sake of this conversation, let's not divide the two. Let's just say the tablets were in there. What are the tablets? What was on the tablets? What was engraved on the tablets?
The Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments. What are the Ten Commandments? The Ten Commandments are more than just a sampling of the 613 mitzvahs. They're actually a code of the whole Torah. So basically we're saying, and this is actually something we studied in chapter 51 and 52 as well, that the Torah is like a courier for this infinite light to come down in its integrity, in its full sense. It kind of allows, it's like it packages it up and allows it to be to come through the world, not, because what happens is when in the normal, in our natural world, the light is changing and and adapting to each world. So it's really going stage by stage by stage. So in the first world, it adapts to Atzilut, and then it adapts further to Beriah and further to Yetzirah. And so it's every change is just tiny bit at a time. And it's really adapting to that level before it moves on to the next level. With the Torah and the Aseret HaDibrot and the Ark and the temple and this Shekhinah experience, it's not adulterated, it's not changed, it's just coming straight. Torah, Ten Commandments. Oh, right, okay. So this is really cool. So the Tanya, if you look at the first page, the Alter Rebbe wants to show us this page here. So the packet of 3, the Tanya. So this is actually going to be from the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Okay. So this is the Tanya, the text of the Tanya, and it's quoting from the Torah. V'haluchot ma'aseh Elokim hema, while the tablets are the work of God. So this is. Most of the time I just tell you where it's from and we move on, but today I really wanted to, this is a very famous midrash. It's a famous truth that we grow up learning about the tablets. So I figured let's go into the Torah itself. So on this little printout, there is Exodus 32:15 and Exodus 32:16. So this is from the second, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the 5 books of Moses. So what does it say? That it's telling us the story of Moses bringing down the tablets. And it says, Moshe turned and went down from the mountain with 2 tablets of testimony in his hand. They were the tablets written on both sides. The writing was visible. Sorry, it's adding come. So it says in Hebrews, Mizeh umizeh heim tuvim. From here and from here, they were written. So then we have Rashi that explains, what does that mean? From here and from here, they were written. So the next little box has Rashi's commentary, which says, that means that on both their sides could the letters be read. And this constituted a miraculous piece of work. So in other words, they were engraved. Well, actually, let's go to the source to find out what that actually means. Because you see, where did Rashi take his commentary from? From Shabbat 104a. That's from the Talmud. So Rashi didn't make anything up. This is something I teach my elementary school students when they study the Torah and Rashi's commentary. Rashi didn't make anything up. He was very smart. And so what happened is he had mastered the whole Torah and oral Torah that was known, and some Kabbalah too. And he was like an encyclopedia. And so when he would study the Torah and he'd come up with a question, he would cross-reference, oh, I know the answer because I read it in the Talmud over there. Or I know the answer because, and then he would quote it for us, for the 5-year-old actually. That was his motto. Anyways, that's a whole other topic. So skipping the next verse, going to Shabbat 104, the source where Rashi got it from. The letters Mem and Samech look like a circle. So what happens is they were engraved all the way through. Each letter was chiseled all the way through the tablets. So it wasn't like a normal engraving where you have like a little bit from the top engraved and the rest is solid. The tablets were engraved through, so they were like see-through. But if that's the case, the inside of the Samech and the Mem would fall out.
Right.
So the miracle that the Talmud is telling us happened was that the letters Mem and Samach that were in the tablet were standing miraculously. They were levitating.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And it goes on to explain that the tablets were able to be read from all 4 directions. There was no side and there was no back. It was just, no matter which way you looked at the tablets, they were legible and they were engraved all the way through. So what this is describing, and the reason why the Tanya is quoting this little tidbit here, is because it's like illustrating how the Torah doesn't follow the rules of nature. Because the 10 Commandments and the tablets were like the embodiment of the Torah, the physical manifestation of the Torah, where you can actually look at tablets and say, this is the Torah. And they were designed specifically in a way to display its not following natureness. So that's the point of this whole thing. And then I have at the bottom here, just for your interest, I repeated the same verse again, using a specific chumash that has that puts the commentary inside the translation, so you can see how the commentary is in the translation there. Okay, so that's for you and to enjoy on your own time. In any case, why are we talking about the Shekhinah? So,
What's the literal translation of the
Shekhinah?
Yeah.
Shekhinah is hard to translate. It comes from the root word of dwell. It's basically describing the aspect of God that dwells, that rests here on earth.
Yeah.
And actually the word Shekhinah is a feminine word. That's because the Shekhinah is the feminine aspect of God. And actually in the Kabbalistic progression, it's the level, it's like a transplant from the level of God of Malchut of Atzilut. Malchut is royalty, and it's a feminine aspect also. So it all aligns. It's called the daughter later in the chapter. It's a very feminine aspect of God that rests and dwells and can be appreciated. So the second temple wasn't exactly like that. It throws that in here. The second temple had some imperfections.
The tablets weren't there.
The tablets weren't even, and that's exactly why. And that's the Tanya connects that. Thank you for reminding me. That is actually the whole point. And the reason why the Shekhinah didn't rest in the same way, because the tablets weren't there. So it did have a Shekhinah aspect. It did have a level of Shekhinah, but it wasn't the same as the first temple.
Is it from the Makom? Is it from the place that Shekhinah came?
It went through the levels.
Right. No, but I mean the Temple Mount.
Yeah, we are talking about
the foundation stone of the Temple Mount. Isn't that?
Are you asking if the Shekhinah is still there? Yeah.
Underneath all of the.
I think that there's a remnant. I think that after the giving of the Torah, the principle, the understanding is that when something holy or special happens in a place, it will have an everlasting effect on the place.
Where was the first
It was both on the same spot. It was right behind the Kotel. Both of them were both there. Yes. And we know, according to our research, the spot that's the closest to where the Holy of Holies was.
Right.
And it's underground.
Right.
Yeah.
Blocked by others.
So, but the first temple, the second temple wasn't exactly the same. It didn't have the tablets, but the first temple was very special because the Shekhinah that was there wasn't only the most holiest spot on earth, it was the holiest spot in all the 4 worlds. And why is that significant? Because remember, we're tying together all the things that we've like covered throughout the Tanya and learned about. We're basically putting it all together. So we learned about this idea of creating a dwelling place for God on earth. That the Shekhinah on earth being the most exalted place in the entire cosmos of all the worlds of the universe reflects that. Meaning that the goal of our having an earth, the goal of why God created this earth was in order for us to create a home for him here. In order for this to be the ultimate place, the ultimate spiritual place. And we learned about why specifically on a physical place does God want that to be, and that's like, because it's the coolest thing, because it's like it's no big deal for God to be spiritual, for there to be a spiritual experience in a spiritual place, but specifically in a place that naturally conceals God is the big deal. And that's we learned about that in a whole chapter or a few. But again, we're tying it all together. So the Shekhinah that was the biggest manifestation of God. Today, we don't have a first temple or a second temple, and this is where we're headed. How do we connect with Shekhinah today? So, on the second page, so the back page.
So you're talking about physical places thus far.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So far it's been physical. So far we're talking about a physical space, which is kind of cool because we're marrying a physical space with an infinite experience.
But once that was destroyed,
It's not going to be a physical
it's
space
going to be a
anymore.
metaphor.
Yes. Well, not quite a metaphor, but it's going to be something we can take with us wherever we go.
Okay.
Can I have a quick question?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the four worlds, are they all in the same
Physical space.
physical space, in a different energy field level type, or is it how do I
It's a great question.
imagine it?
It's a very important question because the answer is that we're not talking about physical spaces. We're not talking about planets. We're talking about planes of existence and consciousness. So when the creative process goes through four worlds. When you think of an idea and then you create it, you can break down each aspect, each part of your creation to a world of creation. Because remember, this is a creative process of God creating the world. So the first step is like that it came from nowhere, right? Like this idea comes from nowhere, a spark, something from nothing. For God, it's a little bit more something from nothing than it is for us, but there is still an aspect. We are created in the image of God. So we can experience a reflection. So when we create something, we are actually like, we can be godlike. For example, having a child is godlike. We learn about that. So then the second stage of fleshing it out into like all the details and creating blueprints, for example, that would be the second world. Then the third world, or maybe in a conceptual way. And the third world would be more of a visual way and an emotional way. The third world is very emotional. When you get really emotionally attached to it. And the fourth world and final world is about actualizing. And God wants his presence in the actualized world. He wants it in a place of action. So that's a foreshadow for us.
So creating and the art and whatever sparking idea and creativity is basically the closest to God we're ever getting.
It's a creative process, just like when God creates the world. So we can use that idea, like that's the four worlds. Yeah. So the four worlds are planes of consciousness. Okay. So how can we connect to Shekhinah today in this world? So the last paragraph, the last little two lines at the end of second page, it says, and since the destruction of the temple, of which the sanctuary was a part, God resides in the shrine of the holy. So this, I don't like those words, but it's just like very, I don't know, it's hard to connect to. But God resides in the Holy of Holies of the Torah and the Mitzvot. For as mentioned earlier, the Shekhinah must reside in the Holy of Holies. Okay. That's not.
This is the Tanya?
There it is. Yes, the packet is the
It
Tanya.
feels written differently.
Yes, it is, because the Chabad, I get it from Chabad.org, like the printout. This is all in a book, printed, like, it's a very old translation, like
Was it written
60
in
years
Hebrew?
old.
language
The
is it?
Tanya, the Tanya text is in Hebrew. The translation and the explanation, there's many versions that different scholars that have undertaken this project. This one is probably one of the first. It was done by Rabbi Weinberg, and it's kind of like the gold standard. It's like the lessons, and it's like 60 or 70 even years old.
Which one were we reading before?
So it's the same,
Oh.
but Chabad.org has it online, and it makes it easier for me to print it out
Oh.
versus like photocopying books.
The writing feels a little tricky.
Right. So what I'm getting at is that they basically are remastering their website. So some of the chapters look a little bit more modern. Okay. I'm going to read this in Hebrew because it's hitting better. When the temple was destroyed, Ein lo lahakadosh baruch hu be'olamo ela dalid amot shel halacha bilvad. Very interesting language. Oh, there it is. The translation's on the next page. God, blessed be He, has but the 4 cubits of halacha alone. So what is halacha? Halacha is law, is Jewish law. So I have had the privilege of studying with some of us. Actually, we once opened up the Shulchan Aruch when we learned about how important halacha is, and we learned about how detailed it is. Like, how do we, light the candles on Shabbat? Should it be like this? Should it be like that? Right? That's halacha. So before Shabbat. So halacha is like the books of the Torah that have all those details in it. They're more like the law books. What is being said here is the halacha is being compared to, it's like being compared to a physical space. When it says that, what does God have now? What's God's home now? Because we were saying, where was God's home before? Where did God feel the most comfortable? Where did He rest? Where did He put His Shekhinah? In the temple, in the Holy of Holies, where the 10 Commandments were, because that's His wisdom. That's His little capsule. So if we don't have a physical space for the Torah to be represented now, then what's the closest place God can have where He feels the most at home? It would be the halacha. It would be His will delineated. That's where He's at home. That's where we can find what He wants. That's where He put His will. How do you get to know somebody? You get to know their likes and dislikes. When God is telling us the mitzvot of the Torah and He's telling us how to do them, He's telling us, He's giving us a glimpse into Himself, into His personality, what He likes, what He doesn't like. And so it's logical to say that's where we can find God at home. And this brings us to tie in the next stage of our Tanya learning, which has been, we spent many chapters talking about the importance and the advantage, the superiority of action over feelings or inspiration. Yes, feelings and inspiration are part of the package. They create a well-rounded experience. But we have analyzed and come to understand that I can feel great. I can feel, such beautiful love towards something, towards a person. I can feel really, really passionate about a person. But if I don't put that into some sort of action, it's really hard for that person to ever even know that that's happening. Even saying it is an action, like speaking is an action. So if you're communicating that love, you are acting on it. And that's what the person appreciates. If you're buying a gift, if you are, doing an act of service, all those things are in the action sphere. Even, by the way, consciously thinking is an action too. But feeling without communicating it, without acting on it, doesn't have an effect. it's but then of course it's important. That's we had like 10 chapters of Tanya talking about how important it is to feel feelings, and then we have meditations for love. Why? Because if we act without feeling, it's dead. But if we were to feel without acting, nothing happens. And we talked about the elevator button, right? You can understand how the elevator works, but if you don't actually press the button, nothing's going to happen. You will not go to the next floor. And that's also so cool because it equalizes us. Because it puts us all on the same playing field. If Torah were all about, if creating a dwelling place for God were all about feeling into loving him and connecting on an emotional level, then we would not all have the same shot at being part of that experience. Some are born with a predisposition towards spirituality. Some are born with a more emotive predisposition. We have scholars. We have those who had the socioeconomic opportunity to study and to learn about what it means. We have had those, especially throughout history, the simple Jew that didn't have a chance to study and understand what God is all about. So that wouldn't be fair. But it's not about how much we can feel into it and be inspired. It's not about the level of fear of God that you have, even though we learned about those levels. And it's not about the level of love, even though we learned about those levels. It's about the action, which is the same for everyone. Everybody knows that children love to press the button on the elevator, right? Because it makes it go, right? We can all do that. We can all make it go. And this is really cool when you look at the Tanya from a historical standpoint. It brings us full circle. When we started our study, the very first class, I gave you a little background of what point in history that Tanya was shared with the world. So the Baal Shem Tov began the Hasidic movement, and his disciple's disciple was the Alter Rebbe who wrote the Tanya. So part of the same movement. Before the Hasidic movement was founded, Judaism was not that joyous. And Judaism was not that accessible. It was very much like a caste-based system where there was the scholar class and then there was the simple people class and they were looked down upon. There was a lot of duty-based observance and not a lot of joy. And it was aligned with what the Jewish people were going through at the time, which was a whole lot of persecution and the Pale of Settlement. And it wasn't a fun time. So it's not like it's understandable that this was what was going on. It was a downtrodden time. It was a result of persecution. But then the Baal Shem Tov was like, this is not how it was meant to be. So there was always the select few that received the Kabbalistic tradition from their teachers. And it was passed down, but it was secret. What the Baal Shem Tov did was share little nuggets of Kabbalah with the world, which he got so much pushback about. People really didn't like it. Of course, you know how people do not like to lose control, and they don't like to, lose their special edge. So it didn't come without its resistance. But what he was sharing, so he started out with a few principles. He started out with joy. He started out with God being involved in every detail of life. These little principles, Kabbalistic nuggets. He started out with love of God, love of every Jew, love of the Torah being all the same. So these were the little nuggets he taught. And then 2 generations later, the Alter Rebbe took the same nuggets, and he took it a step further, and he shared it in long form with the Tanya, and with more books than just the Tanya, and then he was imprisoned, which was basically is this a good time, right? Yes. Well, the Undaunted was actually a few generations after that.
Wow.
The Alter Rebbe's story was what we celebrate on the 19th of Kislev, right before Hanukkah. So
Can you say again what, so the Alter Rebbe kind of codified some of this?
Well, he basically wrote an encyclopedia of Hasidic understanding and philosophy, which is the Tanya. And more than that. He wrote more books than that. Like he wrote, like Likutei Torah is like nuggets of pearls, like diamonds of wisdom. It's amazing. And then he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish law. He didn't make it up. He wrote his version, and in his version of it, he like put in some meaning and some inspiration, like intertwined, which we got to experience. So he was basically revolutionizing how we can. What is Judaism all about, right? Is it about, putting your head down and just do? Well, doing, yes, but let's understand what we're accomplishing when we're doing. That's the point of the Tanya. Let's understand where we're going with this. We're creating a spiritual space for Hashem, a home where he can feel comfortable in the physical world. How do we do that? With our physical actions. And in the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe gives us this example of this oil and flame and wick, and that's how it concludes. So I've printed out like a little explanation for you on this page. You can read it later. But under that big box, it talks about the supernal light that is kindled on a Jew's head, namely the Shekhinah, requires oil. So there's this like visualization. So we're talking about the Shekhinah being on every single one of us. So we went from the beginning of the chapter where we're talking about the Shekhinah being in the temple, and now we're understanding actually the Shekhinah is on our heads. Every one of us. And how? Because we all have a body and a soul. We learned about our body and our soul in the very first few chapters of Tanya. And we learned that our body comes from a certain thing called klipas noga. You remember, like the shining shell? And we learned that our soul comes from God. It's a flame of God. So the flame is our soul, our godly soul. And the wick is the body. The flame consumes the wick. In other words, the flame, the godly soul, is utilizing the raw material that the body gives it, the limbs, the energy, to shine. But what does the flame need in order for the Shekhinah to continue to burn is the oil. And what is oil according to Kabbalah? Wisdom. And what is wisdom? Torah. So it all gets tied together. That we basically fuel our fire with our connection to Torah and mitzvot, which comes back to action being the main thing, because Torah and mitzvot are action-based. So that's how the Tanya all ties together.
Well done.
Wow.
And in doing this, he was democratizing.
Exactly.
He was offering it to all of us as, like, book one, in at least for me, has really become like a moral compass of a kind. Because it's very confusing times to live. But
Well, it's a how-to guide. That's what it is.
If you go back to the Tanya, you find your center. Try to find that spark.
Yeah, because it starts with
and fuel it.
understanding who we are and how we're made up of, and we've got a godly soul, and we got to, and it talks about the tzaddik's path, and it's actually, that also ties together in the end of the chapter, saying how a tzaddik does this by completely transforming their animal soul to where it's just totally a vehicle for godliness. But we don't have to do that to accomplish the exact same thing with the oil and the flame and the wick. All we have to do is channel our animal soul's action and accomplish the same thing that tzaddik accomplishes. So that also gets tied together, understanding the different types of, the tzaddik's path, the Beinoni's path, and the Beinoni's path is just as good.
One other question,
Yeah.
sorry. Action is so important, but didn't we also learn that part of understanding Hashem's awe, the awe of Hashem, is our discretion, is our forbearance, in a sense, isn't that also an action? Because there are many mitzvot that we learn that, no, you don't want to hurt this body by putting your finger in a flame. You know, it's that kind of thing. So I'm just using that as a stupid example. But so you're saying the importance of action, but that action also is the container of discretion as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So it's a full experience when the action is the result of an emotion, right? When it's a passionate action, like when we do something for our loved one that is meaningful because it's full of heart, it's full of love or respect or whatever it is that we're expressing through the action. That doesn't mean that you can't also do the action if you're not there yet. It's the beauty of making the action the main thing is that you can start somewhere. It's not all or nothing.
It's hard to